Hello, good evening to everybody. Here is Dr. Aispurua speaking. I am the Chief Medical Officer of the Ivf-Spain group, IVF-Life. I welcome you to this online event. We want to cover open questions about the COVID crisis and how to come back to normality and to perform cycles and keeping on helping you in your child wish under these new circumstances. We have prepared a couple of slides which are easy and fast to go through. The main objective for us is to allow you to ask questions. So therefore, you have a window where you can write your questions. First feedback I would like to have is if you can understand me, if you can see and listen to the sound, and if technically everything is okay so far. In order to start, if some of you could please confirm on the questions window. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you so much for this participant confirming that technically everything is okay. So first of all, I would like to make a short introduction to the COVID and its relationship with assisted reproduction techniques and early pregnancy, and to give some light to fears and questions around: is it safe to go for a pregnancy now? What could happen if I am infected middle in a treatment? What can happen if I get infected in the early or in the late pregnancy? What is the experience to that? And the answer is we have not so much data and not so much evidence. There are only a couple of studies that has been published in the past showing that there is absolutely no risk in the second and third trimesters of the pregnancy, showing that pregnant women at all are not at a higher risk of getting infected or of having more serious development of the disease. This is a fact, and women in pregnant age are per definition not the risk group. You know, this is more males and this is more elder people which can be seriously get affected. So we are on the safe side of the story. Regarding early pregnancy, I have to admit the first SARS virus had or showed the capability of what we call vertical transmissions. This means that a virus could overpass the placenta and go from mother's blood into fetal blood. This is also fact, and that releases most of our fears. This is not confirmed for SARS-2 or the COVID infection. There is no way for this virus, even if it would be in a seriously affected mother, to come through the placenta and affect the fetus because of a very simple reason, and this is the COVID virus. The SARS-2 virus needs a certain receptor which it uses as a gate to enter into the cells and replicate inside. And this is a receptor of the family of the angiotensin converting enzymes, which regulates in the kidneys and then the suprarenal gland with different molecules involved that helps to regulate the blood pressure. this is possibly the reason why people with high blood pressure are at a higher risk of getting infected and of having more difficult reconvalescence too. And exactly this is the reason why it cannot pass the placenta and infect the fetus, because these receptors, or the gates for the virus, are not present in these tissues. And the same applies for gametes. For gametes in the sense of sperm cells and oocytes that do not carry neither these receptors nor the tissues around the follicles, like the granulosa cells and so on. So this is why generating embryos in vitro is that safe. Yeah, no virus, even if it would be present, and now I will tell you how this is impossible to happen, or the measures that we have taken against this being possible to happen. But even if there were a high charge of virus around, they would never be able to replicate in sperm cells or in oocytes. And this is why all the media and all the embryonic development in vitro is safe from corona. So having said that, we obviously will take distance from transferring embryos in women that are recently infected, because, as you know, the development could go with high fever peaks and other circumstances that will keep the immune system dislocated, and this is something which we know that could interfere the efficiency of a transfer. So implantation failure due to a high fever peak is something which is known. So the only repercussion that a COVID infection would have in our whole procedures is that we would reject to transfer in someone which is recently infected or has recently developed symptoms. And this is the only restriction. Obviously, the first cases happened in November, December in China. The safety regarding the baby and that all newborns of women that were infected is already there, because now in May, most of them made a lot of screenings, and from pregnancies in the first trimester in November and December, they already have delivered, and no one has reported any complications in the newborns or things related to COVID. So this was as an introduction. I see that you are already making some questions. I would prefer now to go very fast through the couple of slides and then give answer to each question. So if you want to write your questions now, the slides are just showing the measures that our clinic and even in the medical assistance sector have been taken to protect and to prevent, and which kind of tests we offer for free to all our patients. And it misses a bit questions about logistics, how to travel and so on. But I think this would be one of the most interesting topics for you. So please ask. You know, our governments in Europe, even in the European Union, and now after the Brexit also with UK, are not so synchronized or so pre-agreed as we would like. So we are a bit suffering some kind of discoordination between parliaments and governments in Europe, but there are some groups now working on coordinating this, and we expect to have answers that will make it possible and safe and supportive for airlines and for normal tourism to restore some kind of corridors between countries in bilateral agreements that we expect to be implemented around July of this year. UK is obviously a little bit delayed from the peak of the infection, from the distancing measures and the lockdowns that applied in Italy and Spain first. It's a different case like Benelux or Germany or Sweden, who managed things differently. And we know that you are now in a phase where mostly fears are in the first plane. And let's say we have passed this a couple of weeks ago. I would say Spain is epidemiologically spoken at least 2 weeks ahead in the happenings and in the developments and in the procedures of the de-escalation. So I just would like to give you, from our point of view, support and also commitment, and also share with you our experience, so this crisis will pass. We will recover and reconquire our freedoms, and we will hopefully soon be able to manage our lives normally. But in UK, it's now on the very critical phase of events, and just our support and our convincement that that you will manage this also to come to normal lives. In order to assure that in our clinic nobody can get infected, we have taken a lot of measures. Some of them are as simple as distancing or physical barriers. Yeah, we have in our facilities big consultation rooms. We can keep in most of the cases the safety distance. Obviously, if it comes to a gynecologic examination or an ultrasound, not. And as the recommendation says, in this case, we will wear, all of us, masks and gloves. You don't need to take gloves when you travel. It's enough if you take masks. So possibly airlines will regulate this also. But it's also a matter not only of managing space, it's also a matter of managing time. We will obviously avoid peaks in the day where a lot of patients can accumulate at the same time in the same place, and we will work longer and distribute all the medical activities as much as we can in order to reduce these risks. We will obviously also have some of the areas and the distribution of space considered in that sense. We will have also physical barriers like protective screens in the reception and in other more communal or general areas. And the most important is that all our staff is already tested completely and will regularly perform COVID tests every 2 weeks. This way, which is unique and which represents a grade of safety which is also unique. This way we can protect ourselves and our staff for sure. If someone is affected, we can isolate this person immediately instead of risking propagation of the virus, and we will protect you also. We will take also measures to protect us against you. This is the next, and this is why we have also introduced the free of cost testing of all our patients when they arrive at our clinic. In some cases or some countries, I don't think that UK will belong to them, but just for you to know, we can also send this blood tube to you at home. You send it back to us and we give you the diagnosis of COVID-free before you travel. There will be some countries or maybe also some airlines that will ask for something like that, COVID-free passport or something like that, in order then to dysregulate quarantines when you arrive or when you come back, as long as you move from an area with a similar profile of risk than another, and you can show that you have close in time negative test, all these restrictions of quarantine will not apply. Yeah. So for UK patients, this means first ask your airline. Yeah, we are in contact with embassies and borders. We know which kind of documentation you need to enter the country safely and not being restricted in terms of persecution. And the same if you need then to get the test done before, as I mentioned, we can perform it for free for all the patients that will attend the clinic after this crisis for the first time. And for those that regularly will come for the clinic, we will not only perform the screening with immunological or serological tests, we will perform also a qPCR for all of them that enter into the OP theater or that are close to the lab. You know, the immunologic test is telling us with a certain delay if you are infective at that moment, and with a high degree of accuracy if you have passed this disease already. But there is a gap of, let's say, 1 week to 10 days where you could be infected and this test is negative. The negativeness of this test is enough to travel here and there, or even to show that you are already immunized, but it's not enough for our self-approved standards of quality that you enter our OP theater or our labs, you or yourselves, without having the qPCR, which reduces this gap of asymptomatic infectiousness and this early risk of transmission to third parties from 10 days to 3. We would love if there would be a test that covers everything, but this is currently not available. You should also know that all these tests that we offer are performed in-house, that we are one of the genetic labs that offered to the Spanish government, this is 3 months ago, our capabilities, and this is a huge capability. We can perform up to 6,000 PCRs a day, and to that time Spain was performing 10,000 at all. So we could have managed more than half of the needs of the whole country just with the machines that we have, and that we wisely invested in highest technology years ago that allow us to cover this and to be adaptive to this situation in that way. And all our patients will also have benefits and take the advantages of having the tests in-house, real-time results, less than 24 hours, and with the accuracy and the reliability of all our labs that are one of 5 with this kind of technological investments and devices in the whole country. And this applies for our clinics in San Sebastian, in Baden-Baden, in Germany, and in Madrid, for sure, the same. And this is the best way of managing those risks for you and for us. What happens now if someone is positive? Yeah, obviously we would immediately repeat the test with a PCR and then isolate this patient as long as he or she is infective. Yeah, we would, as I mentioned before, refuse to transfer. Also, if the case is asymptomatic at the beginning, because it could get symptomatic, and with fever, we don't want to take implantation disadvantages into account. And in this case, obviously, quarantine applies for everybody that is infective, independently of the country and the time where he or she is. Yeah, and traveling would not be possible in that scenario. But I think this is reasonable and this is understandable for everybody. First, everybody wants to be healthy again. Also, another measure not to touch money and hands, and another way of transmission is that we have implemented online payments. So no cash wished. And in summary, I think we can offer this way of comprehensive solutions to ensure your safety and our staff's safety. The tests help a lot. This is the way how Korea or Singapore managed the crisis with success that no other country could reply. This is testing, massive testing, and this is traceability of with whom you have been in contact once you are positive. So breaking and isolating the affected ones could help the other rest of the majority, big majority of the population, to come back to normal lives. It's still a matter of responsibility, it's still a matter of social commitment, and we and you will need to adapt to these new circumstances. In this way, I think the efforts are more than worthy perspective to the impact and that this could have in lowering deaths and lowering the big impact on society that this pandemic has. Here we just comment, I have already commented, the PCR is earlier, it's much more technological demanding. It has to be taken with swabs. The serology is just the blood test for the screening. This is what we would send to you, to your country, if you need to make the test before you arrive, or what we immediately will perform when you arrive. Here we see an algorithm of how this works. This is the part of the screening, which in our opinion should be applied to all companies, to all bigger structures than 5 people together. Antibody testing is not very accurate, but is much better than doing nothing. It's affordable and it gives us a true and real-time picture of who has already passed the disease, who is not at risk of getting it again, and so on. Because once you pass the disease, this was a little bit confusing at the beginning of the pandemic. Once you have passed the disease, the immunity that you get from that is sufficient. Most people thought at the very beginning you could get reinfected. This is not true. This was published last week with a big cohort of more than 1,000 patients in New York and published in a peer-reviewed journal. Once you get the treatment, you have high enough titers of antibodies that protect at least for 6 months. We will see if this pandemic could convert into an endemia, which means that every year, seasonally, it could come again with small mutations like the flu. This is feasible, we will see. Then obviously next year, you could get reinfected again, or in 2 years, once new shapes of mutated viruses emerge. But for now, if you have passed it, if you have a positive antibody test, these are good news. Anyway, once you have a positive antibody test, you would need to go through the PCR test to show that you are not infected at that moment. In this, if this shows that you are not infected, then you can continue activities and then make normal life. If you have a positive antibody test and a positive PCR test, obviously isolation protocols would apply. This is for the beginning, and now I would like to go to your questions. I see there is someone anonymous asking that Spain has international travel restrictions in place. Do you think that people traveling from abroad to Spain for fertility treatment would be permitted to travel to Spain anytime soon? Wow. First, in Spain, it's different than in Germany or Switzerland, where the governments closed private clinics. We have, during all this crisis, which I have to admit in Alicante was not very severe. We had not so many cases like Madrid or things like that. We're in our region at the under average level of risk than whole Spain. But even if not, we had no restrictions of closing our clinic, and we have performed IVF cycles the whole time for our local patients. Not in the way and in the amount we were used to, but the activity still was open the whole time. And even now, where for the general tourism, there are some uncertainties regarding quarantines, if borders get opened or not. Borders were not closed the whole time, and during April and May we had patients that for serious reasons had to travel at that time to Spain, even to collect their eggs or to have transfers or to have a surgery, and none of them have had any problems passing the borders with the medical certifications that we gave them in advance. We will do the same for all patients traveling now with flights. Obviously, the main restriction now for us to see patients is that there are no flights, and not everybody can jump into a car and travel to Spain by terms of time and planification. And from UK, even more difficult. You can take the tunnel or swim through the channel. So we hope that the flights get restored, the traffic of the flights get restored soon. And what we can do is to help you, providing you the tests in advance, providing you the medical certifications that you will need. And once the flights are open, and all airlines will have different rules how to behave if the planes are fully booked or with social distancing, if it depends on the price or on the safety. So first of all, this is a matter that each airline will solve by itself, because the European regulator and also the IATA, the International Air Traffic Association, has not forced to distancing passengers. So there could be that you fly sitting close as usual to the next passenger. It will be mandatory to take masks, and you should know that the air conditioning and air pressure levels of a cabin of an aircraft is much safer than a bus, a train, or even the metro in London, because the air is renovated every 2 minutes, and there are big filters that can provide you much more safety than if you sit in a public bus or in a public train or in a public underground. So this is something that the airlines industries has to, these measures has to be better explained. So the fact of taking an airplane is no more risky. The distance to other passengers is something which is open, and it will be the airline itself which will regulate. And if you have the test done, and so to say, a passport of being COVID-free and a medical certification that your travel is not just for fun, this is for a medical treatment, we do not expect, as we have already not seen in the very lockdown crisis, we have not seen any patient being at the borders being stopped. So this will for sure not happen then in July or August when everything comes back for and even for medical treatments less. I will go to next clinics. How will the free COVID test work for us in the UK? Is something sent out to us before we visit Spain? Not mandatorily, yeah, only in case that your airline demands it, yeah. There are countries that are implementing something like that, like Iceland, yeah, to restore the tourism. They have put in the Reykjavik airport a serological COVID test for everybody that enters the country for free, yeah. And when we see that, also Czechia is managing a situation like this, also in China and in Singapore, and even in Spain, there are some small cities that are testing now the whole population, yeah, just to know who is at risk, who already passed the risk, and how to behave. So this is something that will come, yeah. We don't know if this will be mandatory, but we are prepared that it gets mandatory. And as long as it is optional, it would work as easy as sending you a normal letter by post office with a small tube that you should fill in with blood in your GP or any nurse or whatever. You could take also the blood from the capillary of the finger, but it's more painful at the end, and it's difficult to get more than one drop at once. So better go to have a normal blood extraction anyway, and then you send this tube back to us. Usually fly in 24 hours, fly back 24 hours, and result once the blood arrives here is 6 hours. And then we would send you per email in real time the certification of your result and the certification for travel free. Next question, what would happen to the monies paid if we tested positive just before transfer? Would it just be postponed at no cost? Will we be traveling from Ireland? Okay. If you test positive, so the prepayment in our clinic usually is for all the procedures or the costs that were incurred the clinic before you come. Yeah, it is also a kind of signaling commitment. If you come here and have advanced a certain amount and you get tested positive and you get no transfer, which is the only thing, whereas what I mentioned before, which would be then restricted not to transfer someone which has a feverish infection, at that point, more than 90% of your treatment would have already been done. So, and usually you will have not paid 100% of the treatment. You usually have a prepayment of 70 or 80%. So we would be at that point at least equal, yeah, in terms of debt. If you travel for a first visit and you want to cancel your treatment and not making the prepayment, or if you have prepaid and you want to get the money back, as long as we maintain certain times that we do not incur into costs, we obviously always have paid back. So you are at your right as a consumer of getting your money back if you do not fulfill the service or what you purchase. So there will be no risks in terms of money if you get tested positive. It's more a healthy risk and a manageable risk in terms of adapting all your schedules again, and which has, I can assure you, no additional cost for you. Okay, next question. Hi, I am traveling from Ireland. Accommodation is a concern. Are hotels back in operation? I was in Spain getting treatment in March when the lockdown happened. Had no return overnight and abandoned the treatment. Although the airports did not close until the end of the week. The hotel told me they were closed and I had to leave. Can we trust that there will not be a new surge and they will close overnight again? Okay, so nobody can assure that, but a crisis like the crisis that worldwide has affected all of us, and I have to admit, it has catched us in an unprepared situation. Such a crisis could re-emerge, but will never be the same chaos again. Now, everybody knows how to test. Now everybody knows how to regulate also the laws regarding how this is to manage evolved during the crisis, but now they are established and the world is much better prepared for a new surge of the pandemic than before. The first shot was the heaviest one. And in terms of accommodation, hotels, regulation from the Spanish government, how tourism has to be restarted and so on, there are very, very clear rules. And the risk that this happens are very small. Hotels are allowed to reopen since last week, I think. Some of them will not open because they have not true demand. The smaller ones, the big ones, chains and so on, they will all open. And the only restriction is that bars will keep closed, that conventions or accumulations of more than 12 people at one site will be closed. Restaurants will be open. Terraces are already open, but with only a 50% of capacity, so that the desks are in safety distance. So all this is, believe me, extremely regulated, and we have 8 or 9 parties in our government and in our parliament, and 2 in our government, which kept fighting the whole 12 weeks, last weeks, kept fighting on how defining all this and how to regulate all these risks. And at the end, there is agreement, there are stable laws, there are credibility, and for your and our relaxation, also there are now rules that are clear and will allow to come back to normality. Next question. When flights are open, which procedure do I have to carry on before getting the medical pass? You will just need to send us an email. We will need to reassure your appointment, to fix it, maybe to adapt it to the flight's availability. In the past, we had nearly daily flights from all corners around UK. Maybe this summer we will have enough flights, but not so many as in the past. So it could be that instead of choosing the date, you can jump into a plane from Newcastle to Alicante. It's not 7 days a week. It will be maybe 2 or 3 days a week. So maybe we have to readapt your schedule to your air flight plan. So the first thing that we are offering our patients in order to reconfirm appointments is, please make a call or a consultation to your airline provider or to your touristic office or whoever was in charge of booking your flights. Ask about the availability of those flights, make the reservation, confirm to us that you got a reservation to that time. When we confirm to you that an appointment in our clinic is possible at that time, buy the flight then. In the meantime, if you need the COVID test being done, we will send it to you. In the meantime, if you need the certification that you will travel for a medical treatment, it's in less than 24 hours in your desk, and then you can fix the flight, fix the visit, and minimize the risks. Okay, next question. There was also a talk of a 2-week quarantine when entering or leaving the UK. Is this likely to stay in place or affect us? This is what I mentioned before, the discoordination between governments. Boris Johnson said something like that at the very beginning. Spain's Prime Minister said something similar a couple of weeks ago, and the French president got quite angry with that, and then answered that he will also restrict the entrance of Spanish people into France. So at the end, this was a bit of chaos, but there are now intergovernmental task forces and desks in interest of whole Europe, which internal brutto product depends as much as 20% on tourism and flights. It's not only a matter of Spain, it's for all of our countries a true impact on the economies if this gets not restored. So I am sure that our politicians will be able before end of June to have an agreement on that. And I know that Spain and the British governments are already now working on a bilateral corridor for a lot of UK citizens that have houses in Spain, for a lot of Spanish students that have to attend their courses in UK, for a lot of tourists that usually came to our beaches in summer, and at the end also for people like you that travel to Spain for medical reasons or other business reasons. So it's in our common and bilateral interest that this gets regulated. And I just know that they are now sitting, and there is an interdisciplinary conference that will regulate all this bilaterally between UK and Spain, because UK does not belong any longer to the European Union, but Spain is making the same also now with France, with Germany. Germany has already opened flights to Mallorca. Mallorca is a big German hotspot. A lot of second residencies of German people are in Mallorca, the same as for the Alicante area for UK citizens. Yeah, so Germans are in Mallorca, UK citizens are here, and these will get regulated. So I am a little bit suspicious about the efficiency of our politicians, but in this case, I hope they can solve that properly. Next question, what fertility tests can be done at home, UK via courier prior to travel to Spain for treatment? Usually what we have changed now for first visits, it's to make the first visits online, so all medical aspects can be cleared in advance while you sit at home. Some of the pre-treatments or the supplementary drugs that we need for a successful treatment usually need 2 or 3 months of being used before. So the waiting time now can be used as pre-treatment time. I would offer to you a full Skype first visit, then with an appointment for a true first visit, where instead of being just informative, this first visit would then focus on medical things like taking biopsies, even taking blood, even making the advanced spermiogram, even making unnecessarily and independent from third parties the fact that we could plan your treatment without the need that the GPs in UK are again working in normal cases and not in the COVID crisis, independently if UK clinics close, which is to my knowledge the fact. All NHS clinics will not start before August or September, but it's understandable because it's a government's responsibility to put all the resources now to prevent deaths in the health sector with the COVID crisis. And I know that good friends of my gynecologists and anesthesiologists are now working in intensive care units, helping COVID cases. So, but this is the management of the NHS, which makes sense and which gives maybe the wrong idea that fertility treatments are forbidden now. No, they are not reasonable because NHS has also limited resources. Private clinics in the UK may open, yeah, some of them I know that are already open and making treatments, but they will be overwhelmed, yeah, by all the other patients. So just let's better keep things in our hands. Let's make whatever is possible in advance via a teleconference and via sending you prescriptions, starting treatments, and in order that when you arrive for a physical first visit in Spain, we can cover everything which is relevant and crucial and medical in one short stay of just 1 day. Next question, if we have a waiting list. We would like to have a waiting list. What we have now is an incredible decrease of our activity. And what we have is now time and resources even to treat patients telematically, to review cases of the past, to review and to improve procedures. This is how we are now employing our time. but what you mean with that is possibly the rebound effect. Yeah, we had obviously for full April, May, and June a lot of treatments already booked that got cancelled or delayed. Better said than cancelled, delayed to June, July, and August, and we will have a certain rebound effect. Yeah, also many patients that usually have had come in this time for a first visit, now we are managing from distance telematically, but all this will accumulate for sure. This is why we have adapted. Most of our staff has already taken holidays. Usually in Spain, maybe you remember we used to work only half of the staff from mid of July to end of August. This year we will work full through and even extend our working times and distributing in times and spaces everything in order to be able to afford the increasing demand. Another question, has anyone with your clinic tested positive for COVID? Yes. We had from 140 employees in 4 clinics, 4 of them positive, most in Madrid, which is not surprisingly, because in Madrid the situation was much heavier than elsewhere, and 2 of them showed to have had the serological test positive and the PCR negative, which means they are not infective and they are already immunized, which is the best test result that you can have. I would wish to have such a result for me, but unfortunately I showed a negative serologic test. This means I never had contact with the virus and I could get it. So this is why I'm still careful and complying with protective measures in my interest and in your interest. But we will provide these testings regular to all our patients. So this is not just a one shot approach. We will make it every 2 weeks for everybody, yeah, which is unique, I mentioned before. We have ourselves and our lab together with a company which advises in labor risks in companies and offices. We will make a letter of accreditation for other companies, for other clinics. So we will together with the Spanish regulator who gave us the permission, we will make accreditations for COVID-free areas for other companies and other offices. This is the way we can contribute to reestablishing commercial activities all around, also in a proper way. Why? Because we can, and we feel we have the responsibility to contribute somehow to coming back from this crisis to normality as soon as possible. And making the tests regularly to our staff, as long as it's necessary, I would say till end of the year for sure. We will not only have a picture of what is happening now, we will also be able to react properly, because you know the transmissibility of this virus is quite high. One person can infect 5, and in former times with no distancing, with no physical barriers and so on, this was the capability. Now it's lower, but imagine in your office or in your company, if there is one affected, just 8 weeks later, more than half of the staff could be affected. And this is also a big economic risk for everybody who appreciates to work. Okay, next question. Have you seen a decline in the number of egg donors since COVID? How will you synchronize egg collection from a donor in Spain and implantation during this time, as I would be traveling from the UK? we have not seen a decline in egg donors' interest. We, in fact, have started recruiting them in a big way a couple of weeks ago. Some of them are already in stimulation. We provide to all of them the full test, serologic and qPCR, which gives them also certain relaxation. And we don't think so far that this could affect any way our planning of treatments. Next question, what if we can't reserve a flight and have to pay for it upfront? How will appointments work? You may if you pay for the flight or if you pay for our first visit. So for the flight, I think a couple of weeks ago, the European Union and the IATA has forced the airlines to give the money back. Some of them wanted to say, okay, I give you a free bonus, you can fly for the same amount during the next months whenever you want. And okay, this may apply for fertility treatments, because if you don't fly now, maybe you fly in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. But for people that make seasonally tourism, that have only 2 weeks in a year to come to Spain to the beach, if they cancel this one flight, maybe they are not interested in getting it compensated with another flight, and they prefer to get the money reimbursed, because otherwise they would need to wait 1 full year again before they have interest to come to Spain again. And there the European Union and the International IATA Association obliged the companies to give the money back if the clients ask for reimbursement. So from the travel part, you could get the money back. And from the clinic part, you don't need to pay in advance for a first visit. So you usually pay here once it is fulfilled. So also no risk. Next question, given that we will now need to do preliminary tests here in the UK with NHS not available for this currently, are there any private clinics that Ivf-Spain collaborates with in the UK where we can get these tests done? I would not say that we do know now that we will need the tests. I just said this is thinkable that such a measure get implemented during the next weeks or months. If it's not the case, we can make it optionally. If it is the case, as we mentioned before, there will arise, or we don't need to discover in UK clinics or GPs or even nurse associations or even pharmacies that will offer the test for everybody very soon, just for commercial reasons. So believe me, yeah, there will be a lot of offers. Another question is if you don't want to make a cheap China test with a very small sensitivity and specificity with no medical certification of the result. So this is another question. Then, as we mentioned, we can send you the blood tube and we can perform the test in our house for free. Yeah, you will just would need to pay for sending it from the post office. And serious clinics and GPs in UK that will offer the test for, let's say, 50 euros or so, if they are not already there, they will rise up from the ground like flowers in spring. Next question, do we need COVID tests done? Oh, if we are traveling from UK by car? No, possibly not. And possibly if you travel with the airline, also not. I just mentioned this is something that could happen and that airlines will regulate differently. So way for you to proceed is the following. If you take a flight, then ask the airline for making possible your reservation in certain dates. Second, confirm to us these dates in order that we readapt and reschedule your appointment. Third, we give you the certification, the medical certification that you travel for a medical reason, which is possibly more than enough. And only in case that you want, or instead of performing the test when you arrive, you want to perform it at home, or your airline demands it because things could change in the next weeks, then we would send you the tube. This for flights. And for cars, with the letter, the certificate that you are traveling for medical reasons to Spain, that we already have used for patients from Switzerland, from Germany, and from France, that none of them had a problem crossing the borders, you can be completely relaxed and released. This will be easy to manage. Next question, can your clinic arrange male karyotype test via courier to from UK as part of the pre-treatment at home? Yes, this is very easy. The only thing is that the tube we will need to send to you is a very special tube, which is called heparin lithium, which allows the cells of your blood that we will later cultivate in order to select and count the chromosomes, that we will survive at least 3 days. So as long as you take your blood with a nurse or a GP and you send it to us, let's say urgent, you pay instead of £2, maybe £10, then the tube arrives in Spain with guarantees inside the next 24 hours. So this means we would have still 2 days to proceed your testing and to have reliable results. So the answer is yes. Sorry, I meant preliminary tests like ultrasound, spermiogram for a treatment. No, this kind of tests make absolutely no advantage for us if you perform them in your country. If we could fix that you get prepared, yeah, and in a way, yeah, and your male and female both in a way that the day you arrive in Spain, I always trust much more an ultrasound that I perform myself than a picture or a document showing me a description of what foreign doctors or other doctors see or think is more relevant to me. So this is why, to make things easier, all the time before you arrive to Spain, I would concentrate in maintaining distance, in not getting infected, take seriously your lockdown, take seriously your confinement and your social distancing. Don't go for unnecessary ultrasounds into unnecessary waiting rooms, getting mixed with people. Stay safe, stay home. Let's make whatever we can start online, let's make it online. And when you arrive to Spain, it will be also much more affordable for you, because in the first visit, all the blood tests are included, all the ultrasounds are included, the spermiogram and the freezing of the sperm is included. So you will save money, you will save also taking unnecessarily risks, getting mixed now there in medical consultations where maybe affected people could also be there. So this is why we have focused on advancing as much as possible online, and when you arrive here, providing all what we need for prospective treatment and a safe treatment in one shot. Okay, I think there is one last question. The ultrasound clinics are closed here in Ireland. Can I get the pre-transfer scans done over there when we travel? Yes. The pre-transfer scans are, let's say, a nice routine that we used in the times pre-COVID, and in order to have also your commitment, the commitment of the doctors, and the visibility before you come. But if you are already a patient of us, if we already have made a transfer with you or a test cycle, ultrasounds for endometrial lining are not necessary at all in this crisis time, because one of the features of the endometrium is endometrium and uterus. Let's say it's a numb organ. It's not very clever. It always repeats what it can. And if you have once made a substituted cycle with not showing any deficiency in blood supply, in endometrial lining, in transformation after progesterone, this will repeat every time in your life until you deliver or until you have surgery of your uterus. This is, you can count on this. This is why if you come for a transfer and we see 1 or 2 days before the transfer just your lining, and if we can assure, which is much more important than the lining, that the timing of the drugs was the correct one, and that you really started the progesterone 5.5 or 6.0 or 6.5, this is crucial. If we can measure your progesterone levels here, your estrogen levels, we can see the thickness of the endometrium, and you can assure us that all these timings of the drugs were perfectly done, then we don't need you to go for an ultrasound scan before you travel. So now we have more questions. Thank you for the clarification. We'll get in touch. Okay, thank you very much for the helpful answers. Thank you too, Karen and Simon. Do you do to patients with fibroids? Sure. Fibroids is not a discrimination reason. Fibroids are usually not impacting so much fertility treatments. And last question, I have frozen embryos waiting to be transferred. Is there any reason to test my donor for COVID? No, absolutely not, because your embryos were possibly generated much more before the COVID came to Europe, and also the transmission risk from a donor to an embryo and to yourself is zero, as I said in the introduction. If there is a chance that they were affected during the treatment, could this affect my embryos? No, I explained that in the introduction. There is no risk for egg cells because they don't carry these ACE receptors that the virus needs to enter into a cell. The same happens with the cells surrounding to the follicle. The same happens to the sperm. The same happens to the endometrium. So reproductive and genital tissue, genital tract tissues are not infectable, and thus the question is easy to answer. Zero risk. Okay, I think that's all. Just want you to know, if you are already patients, if you have questions. And as I said before, we are now doctors, and me, myself, increasingly making very short video calls with patients to refresh concepts, to check previous plans, to adapt it to new times, to reconsider things. and to get back in contact. You can get this kind of appointments of 10 minutes video calls or 15 minutes video calls with me anytime through which kind of email address, contacts, or to the one which appears here. And then we would like to with pleasure to restart your treatment, to rescue your files from the desk, and review it, and share with you our views, and plan with you the next steps from you. Okay, everything fine, everybody happy? I see there are no more questions. Hope this was helpful, and wish all of you a nice evening. And next days we will be offering new contents and new conferences. Hopefully in future they could be not only anonymous this way, maybe also interactive, that we can see each other. We are working on that. Okay, all good. Thank you, very helpful. What's your last remark? I think the same. Thank you so much, and nice evening. Bye bye.